Yeah, no, I buy into that big time. Yeah. Right. Okay. I'm sorry we had to put you through all that. I tell you what. So I mean, that's why we're. You know, walking around with like finance on.
Does everybody have their mics on, please? I think you can get going, Mr. Massey. Mr.
Hello?
Harris will not be here, but you have everyone else. You have a-
Hello?
Yep. Is that, well, you've got all your members.
Yeah. Also have the meeting minutes to approve from February 20th.
I didn't have them on the agenda because we didn't get them till late, so we'll carry them over to the next meeting.
Okay. I did have a concern about those.
Yeah, we can address them at the April meeting.
Okay. All right, this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Warren Planning Board, Monday, March 28th. 7, the meeting will, any member of the public wishing to submit written comments must do so by 4 p.m. on 3/8/22 by emailing them to Bob Ruley, Town of Warren Government.
Didn't get any.
We didn't get any. We have a roll call here. If I could just have you say your name.
I'll do it. So Mr. Atwood is here, Ms. Giles is here, Mr. Bovine is here, Mr. Dixon is here, Mr. Patterson is here, Mr. Massey is here, Mr. Gerhardt is here, Mr. Levers is here. Ms. Medeiros is ill.
All right. There is nothing on the Waterfront Overlay District Development Plan Review, zoning ordinance article 26. And the first order of business is a public hearing on hazard mitigation, the flood management plan. Could I have a motion to open this as a public hearing?
So moved.
All right, and a second.
So motion by Mr. Gerhardt and a second by Mr. Patterson. Mr. Chair, Kim Jacobs is here. She is the consultant that has worked with the town and the committee to develop the hazard mitigation flood management plan. The public hearing is required. It's the first in many steps of getting this approved. After tonight's public hearing, we'll incorporate any comments or edits that are appropriate. Then it will go to REMA for review, and then to FEMA, to FEMA, and then after FEMA, would come back to the town council for approval.
So a question, do we have any role here to make a recommendation to the council?
You have, not to the council, to the edits as we go to the next step to have REMA approve it and FEMA to approve it.
And then does it come back here as a final? No,
Goes to the council as a final.
directly to the council.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then my understanding is we would incorporate this into our comprehensive plan.
Portion of it will, yeah.
Which, by the way, we will want to reinforce some of those elements, which I think was noted in this plan, in the comprehensive plan, to ensure that those things are able to be used, particularly, for example, in terms of new zoning. That's going to be critical to both the comprehensive plan and to this hazard mitigation plan. Before you start, I just want you to know that I thought this was an extraordinarily thorough job.
Yes.
Went through it word by word over several hours. A very nice job, and my congratulations to the committee as well for a very thorough job. I mean, we're working on the comprehensive plan, and this was notable.
We have two skilled consultants on these plans. I just want to say, and I want to thank both Chief Borges and Chief Souza for their participation on the committee and their attendance here tonight, because they don't have enough meetings to go to at night.
You know, we're not going to go through this word by word.
No, Kim has a presentation that
Right.
she wants to do.
Because, you know, I brought my sleeping bag.
It's 117 slides. It shouldn't take more than 3 hours.
Thank you. Sure.
Well, there's yours.
It's all yours.
So basically, just to go back to your point, at the end of tonight, what I'd like from the planning board is a motion to, for the town to submit the draft hazard mitigation flood management plan to REMA for approval, for review and approval, because that is the next step in the chain of the process. So thank you. So I have my slides up there, and basically I have a series of questions tonight that we'll be answering. What is hazard mitigation? Why do we need a plan? How was the plan prepared? What hazards are included in the plan? What is at risk? How do we mitigate these risks? How is the plan implemented? And then we'll have a public comment and Q&A session. So in terms of how was the plan prepared, basically we had a steering committee who absolutely fabulous. I cannot say enough about how committed this group of people were. It was a combined committee of staff members. We had both of the chiefs who are here tonight, who I very much appreciated having on the committee. Bob was a member of the committee. In fact, he was our chair. And then we had the building official, a public works director, harbor master from the town. And then on the public side, we had Teresa Crane. She at that point was representing the URI Coastal Institute as one of our stakeholders. We had Jenny Flanagan, Deb Jobin, John Messenger, George Piper, who are all residents. And then Julia Twitchell, who was from the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, another good partner for the town. So basically that group met on a regular basis to review information that I present to them, or they would provide input on, and that's how the plan was developed. We use a 10-step planning process.
Yes, it is.
Is it on? Is it not? Is it not working? I'm sorry, I'm not used to using this. I apologize. So go like this if I need to get it closer. we used a 10-step planning process. And the reason we did that, so we basically met both DMA requirements, which is the Disaster Mitigation Act. You're required to do that for a hazard mitigation plan. But the town is considering being a CRS, a community rating system, community. And so we wanted to make sure we met the CRS Activity 10 planning process. They basically parallel, if you see on the next slide, they basically parallel each other on what we have to do, the 10-step planning process and the DMA planning regulations. There are some more requirements for the planning, planning process under the CRS activity. So, but we wanted to meet both of those, and we did. So what else governed our preparation of this plan was the mission statement. Basically, the committee came up with a mission statement that said that we want to reduce Warren's vulnerability to impacts of natural hazards, including threats from climate change and sea level rise. By identifying areas at risk and corresponding mitigation measures, the Hazard Mitigation and Flood Management Plan seeks to reduce the adverse impacts of natural hazards on Warren's residents, visitors, businesses, infrastructure, critical facilities, and historical, natural, and cultural resources. So that was kind of our overriding umbrella that we used for plan development.
CRS. Gives a certain rating that allows people to have points and go. You have a long way to go. But
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's about 10 or 11 committees right now who are CRS communities. And it's a great program because not only does it give you guidance for flood management planning, but it also is incentivized to provide your community with reductions in their premiums if they purchase their flood insurance through NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program. So that's nice for the community. They can get anywhere from a 5 to a 45% reduction in their premiums based on, where how the town does the activities. So that's important. So I think I backwards, but we basically, so what are the hazards included in the plan? Well, obviously flood-related hazards are included, wind-related hazards, winter-related hazards, and then we include some other hazards, which are earthquakes, extreme heat and drought, brush fires, vector-borne diseases transmitted by ticks and mosquitoes, and contagious respiratory infections caused by either influenza virus or coronavirus. And we looked at some plans you might see have climate change included as an actual hazard. We used it as something that amplifies these hazards. So for example, if you look at what climate scientists are saying in terms of sea level rise, that will exacerbate or amplify flood hazards in the future. In terms of heat, it'll exacerbate as we are going into warmer summers with more hot days over 90 degrees. So we used climate change. We looked at all of the top hazards. And then for each of those, we said, what do climate scientists think are going to happen in terms of the future with climate change? So that's how we engage climate change in this particular report. So for each hazard assessment considered, we looked at location, what is going to be affected by this hazard in the town of Warren, what's the extent that's going to be affected, the impact, were there past events, what are the probability of future events, what populations are at risk, and then as I mentioned, climate change impacts. And I'd like to point out the at-risk populations for each hazard. That was something that came up at a public information meeting we had during the process, the planning process. And some of the individuals who attended that meeting asked us to include that. It was such a great ask. It's exceptional to put that in. So for each of the different hazards, we included that, what we thought or who we thought was at-risk population. So I thank those residents for their input on that. So then the next thing is we asked ourselves, well, what is at risk? So then we said there's various things at risk. We got a critical asset list together. And so those critical assets, we had 5 different areas. You can see at the bottom of that map. We looked at different government and emergency operation centers. We looked at natural resources at risk, schools, special population centers, transportation. So we identified all of those different critical assets, and we also mapped them on our vulnerability map. Then we also looked at built environment. What are structures at risk? Your homes, other buildings. We looked at the natural environment, wetlands, and other things. What about the economy and the people? So we looked at all of those different things to see what was at risk. And I did mention that we created a vulnerability exposure map. And I don't know if you had a chance to link on that, but if you do, it's a great map that helped us. It's a wonderful tool for the community to go into, and they can look at their property in terms of these different vulnerabilities, flooding, hurricanes, that type of thing. So then for each of the critical assets, we did a table like the one up there. That one shows some of the schools. I'm not going to show you all of our critical asset list. It would take quite a while, but for each of the critical assets, we looked at the hazards. For example, as you can see, flooding, sea level rise, wind related. You know, is it in an earthquake prone area? Well, really none of these are. Is it subject to brush fires or extreme heat? That type of thing. So we looked at, for each of our critical assets, we filled out a table like that. And that's included in one of the appendix. We also did a flood analysis, and we looked at, if you go back one slide for, sorry, at the bottom there, parcel vulnerability based on flood zones. That's an important table because what it represents is in your velocity zone and your A zone, which are your special flood hazard areas. Those are the areas that FEMA considers at highest risk of flooding. And you have 118 parcels in the velocity zone and 571 in your A zone. Those represent, in terms of assessed valuation, it represents about 20% of your assessed value for principal structures. So that's a lot of money that's in zones that are high at risk of flooding. And that speaks to your economy, which, as I said, was one of the factors we looked at, because if those structures are inundated, you know, do people have insurance so they can build back, or are their structures a loss, in which case, who is going to be then shouldering the tax revenue for those areas if they become a loss to the town? So we looked at that, and there's tables like that included. Yes, we're getting there. So then if you go on to the next page, we were so fortunate with our timing that the URI Coastal Institute, Barrington and Warren, have been working with the Coastal Institute for a while now on a mixed-use climate response demonstration site. And they had a grad student, Pat McMeekin, who was interested in doing some flood analysis. So we were so fortunate that it lined up with this plan development. And so Pat did a lot of flood analysis map series for us. He did a structural damage map series. He did a transportation map series for us. And if you think the report is long, wait till you get to some of the appendix. I included all his map series in an appendix because it's such important information. And I have a couple of those up there. For the one you're looking at right now, that just shows, well, what is the extent to structures if we don't have sea level rise, if we have 2 feet of sea levels, if we have 5 feet with a 100-year storm. So right now, if we didn't, if without sea level, any additional sea level rise, if we had a 100-year storm come through, so basically something akin to the 1938 hurricane come through, basically, based on his numbers rather, 835 structures would sustain some level of damage. 192 of those would have 50% or greater damage. And the parameters he used to assess what damage is are all included in the appendix. So I won't get into that tonight, but so you can see what he based those on. But it's a very important analysis. And again, it speaks to the need to understand what is at risk in your community and what needs to happen to mitigate some of these risks. So in the next one, the next slide, we basically could see that this area, the Market Street area, is the area that is going to be most impacted from a 100-year storm. So we pulled, Pat did some mapping specifically in this area, the Census Block 305 area. And again, you can see that most of the damage is in this area. When we had before, we had your total structures sustaining some level of damage as 835. Here we can see 460 of those. 460, over half, are in this one area. So that speaks to the need to be very innovative. You do not know, well, I hope you do know how fortunate you are to have a planner who thinks outside of the box, who is way ahead of the curve. I mean, I look statewide. He is so far ahead of the curve on what is happening here. And I hope that's appreciated, because this will take the town to where they need to be. You are being proactive rather than reactive, and that's critical. And, you know, so this is a great project. And all right. So I've spoken to flooding. I do want to, say we did this with all of the hazards. So I'm just showing you a little bit of extreme heat now. So for example, with extreme heat, we looked at, a lot of our information comes, of course, from NOAA, and we looked at NOAA's average annual temperature graph from 1900 to 2020, and you can see it's increasing. Okay, we looked at another one of NOAA's maps, observed number of hot days in Rhode Island. You can see that's increasing. So a hot day is defined as a day where your temperature is at or above 90 degrees. And you can see that we're increasing significantly. There's trends. The 2010s were the hottest decade on record. Rhode Island's average temperature has increased by more than 3 degrees in the past century. Narragansett base surface temperature has increased between 2.5 and 2.9 degrees Fahrenheit over this 50-year span from 1960 to 2010. And we have, more intense and prolonged heat waves are predicted with climate change. So when we looked at extreme heat, this is one of the examples of who is at risk. So for this particular identified hazard, extreme heat, we looked at Rhode Island DOH, and they gave us this list of who they felt are at risk from extreme heat. So infants and young children, people with chronic or long-term medical conditions, disabled, etc. And so those type of things are important to be aware of, because these groups of people are in your community. And if you're going to have more heat in the summers, we need to be able to protect them or have them aware of how they protect themselves. Absolutely. Absolutely. So then after we looked at, and we said, okay, here's our problem. What is our solution? How do we mitigate these hazards? And so we said, okay, well, again, the most effective strategy is to be proactive, to take action before disaster occurs. So that's what this plan is trying to do, point out some things you can do proactively. And we didn't want to start at square one, and there's no need to start from square one. Your town has been very proactive already, and you've done a lot of really good planning. You have your previous hazard mitigation plan, you have the state hazard mitigation plan, the comprehensive plan, which is currently being updated. You folks did in 2019, a community resilience building workshop where you identified and prioritized a lot of different mitigation measures. There is as I said, the URI climate response demonstration site, which has identified a number of things you can do. Under that, there was a future with water, sea level rise in Rhode Island that was done, the harbor management plan, the Medicom, market to Medicom adaptation economic development plan. Then we also got some suggestions through the public opinion survey we did in connection with this project, and also some ideas initiated by the committee. So we took all of that in one of the appendix 6.1, I believe. It lists these plans and then the things that were identified in them. So the committee, and they will tell you, they got a lot of information. They were inundated with, okay, here's all the things from these other plans. What do we think is most important to do now? But if we move to the next slide, and I'll come back to this one, we didn't want to look at it without being, thoughtful about it, because we wanted to support the goals of this plan. We wanted it across mitigation categories. So those are like prevention, property protection, public awareness, natural resource protection, structural projects, emergency services protection. So we didn't want to do just structural projects. We want to make sure we're covering a range of type of projects. And then funding. It's lovely to say, let's build a wall, or let's build this, but if we don't have funding available, then let's not put the energy there. So big projects, Army Corps can look at those, and they are looking at those. That's not something you can take on fiscally. So when we looked at this, we wanted to say, it's got to be you've got to be fiscally capable to do this. And you have to have the staff to be able to implement this. So when we looked at things for this next 5-year period, our plan is a 5-year action plan. We looked at in terms of what is reasonable to do, what can you do, what is affordable to do. So for each of the different actions, we looked at, once we came up, we looked at the whole list, and then we pared it down and came up with a more modified list. We combined some things, and we said no to other things, and we added new things, and we came up with a list of 40 actions. And for each of those actions, on the bottom there is we decided who would be the lead in your town and support departments, what was the kind of cost and funding source with magnitude. We didn't have actual numbers, but magnitude of cost, funding sources. Could FEMA, is it something FEMA can provide money for? Is it something that has to come out of the capital program here? What kind of time frame? Is it something that will take a year or 3 years? And what year should we kick this off? In our first year or second year of this plan? Priority ranking, where did it rank based on the steering committee's list? They went through and ranked everything. And does it meet a CRS activity? And again, in terms of, we just wanted to have that highlighted. It's not necessarily a reason to do it, but it's something to be aware of. If you do it, let's get credit for it. An action category, again, where does it fall within the mitigation categories, and what hazard is being addressed? And the reference, I wanted to put that because I wanted people to know where the idea came from. I think it's really important to recognize that you should build on the shoulders of what's been done. There has been a lot of good work done in your community, and we wanted to recognize that with the references to where this came from. Right. So some of the plans, and actually I'm going to have Bob just shoot back up to the couple slides where that one with yep. So I did skip by that, but I want to say, for example, like I just want to give that as an example. We looked at the market to Medicom as one of the plans we looked at, and in that, for example, we saw that with respect to flooding, what could be done, and what is being proposed through the market to Medicom project is just an amazing project that should be supported. And some of then when we go back to the action plans, how can we support that? Well, some of it will need rezoning, some of it will need having some kind of public awareness of buyout structures or that type of thing. So those are things that when we looked at those different things in there, we created actions that would help support some of these initiatives you already started. So if we go back to the first page of the action plan, I don't know if you want me to read all these or not, but basically I'll read the goals at least. So the town had 4 goals. Under goal 1, there were 13 actions that were identified, and these are peered down actions in the report. They're much more, they have a lot more meat to them, but I wanted to peer them down for purpose of tonight. So there was 13 actions, and goal 1 is to strengthen interdepartmental efforts to identify and understand potential natural hazards, climate change and sea level rise impacts and warren, and communicate this information to citizens and business owners through public education and outreach. So most of these actions do have to do with education and outreach programs, but some also, for example, enroll in the community rating system program, which kind of is a bigger umbrella to that, because under that program, it does encourage public outreach. So enhanced GIS capabilities, again, that has public outreach, a mechanism for public outreach, because through your GIS, you can understand your parcel in terms of flooding and things like that. So that's goal 1. Under goal 2, we have 5 actions. And the goal 2 is to incorporate hazard resilience into the provisions for land development, to ensure that the regulatory structure through building inspections, planning, and zoning review reduces exposure to natural hazards, particularly inland flooding, coastal flooding, storm surge, and erosion that occurs in coastal and wetland areas and along stream and waterway corridors. So we do talk about rewriting the zoning ordinance and subdivision development regulations to reflect the updated priorities in the 2022 comprehensive plan, implement hazard mitigation policies for historic structures, continue to enforce the building code compliance, disallow variances from flood regulations for new constructions located in the special flood hazard zone, and that type of thing. So that's goal 2 and the actions associated with it. Goal 3 has a total of 9 actions associated with it. And goal 3 is to protect the health and safety and existing properties by reducing the impact from natural hazards, particularly inland flooding, coastal flooding, storm surge, and erosion through structural and non-structural projects and maintenance, as well as the acquisition of land that serves as a natural buffer. So there's 9 different things, such as working with Rhode Island Department of Transportation to complete drainage improvements along the roadways under their jurisdiction, protect the natural floodplain functions through updated regulatory or other mechanisms, implement green infrastructure improvements, and so forth. Goal 4 has a total of 13 actions. And goal 4 is to protect essential public services and the ongoing operations of critical facilities. So we have items such as continue to meet the national requirements for the fire department. The fire department had an amazing review about a year, is it almost a year ago now? So you should be very proud of them, but to continue that, to identify and secure funding for training and equipment needed for the fire department and our harbor master, consolidate fire rescue into new centrally located fire station headquarters with modern training facilities, continue dialogue with management of nursing homes to assess current status of emergency pre-planning, maintain inventory of existing DPW equipment, continue coordination with MEMA to understand potential response vulnerabilities, and so forth. So those are the type of actions that are included under goal 4. So then the question becomes, well, how is the plan implemented? So now you understand hazards, you've got some possible actions that you can do, that you know that you're capable of doing. They're reasonable in terms of funding and staff. So now how do we implement it? Because if it sits on a shelf, it's of no good to anyone. So we implement it by endorsement from the town officials in the community. We implement it on an ongoing basis. So it's got to be really, ongoing. You've got to keep focus on it. You implement it by incorporating these mitigation goals and activities into other local planning mechanisms. So in other words, into regulations, into the comp plan that's being rewritten, into new programs or initiatives that will be taking place in the town. Make sure whenever you're doing something, you're saying or passing, if something's being done, are we taking into consideration hazard impacts that may happen in 5 or 10 or 20 years or 50 years on this property, that you're thinking ahead. You're not just looking at it statically in today's environment. And then a really important thing is continued public participation. It's really important for, if the community wants resilience, people have to be involved. Your community has to be involved. They have to be educated and involved in the process. So that's.
I just want to add that this document, we have written for FEMA because they haven't been yet. That's what we're the box planning awareness. Assessing applications like hazard mitigation. Documents help us in making the argument that we're not just going to get less. Again, I'm saying something that we're not getting public.
And to that, I worked very hard to cite everything in the plan. And that was really important to me. And one of the, and you'll have all the, in your reference section, it will have all those resources because I wanted to make sure that people who weren't familiar with this topic could go to these and read the expanded report or where I pulled things from. So, I feel very confident in this report and the references that and resources that we used for it. So I guess we will open it to the
Comments.
Well, as I noted before, a very thorough job of identifying areas that need to be addressed. I had some thoughts about some of the things, for example, drainage improvements to streets that should be specifically located. Where are the streets that lead down into the Warren River, the Kickapoo River, that create pollution? And what is going to be done there? There's generally this kind of best management practices, BMP. Nobody understands what those are. What we want are catch basins at those places to preserve the water quality. In section 5, page 12, action 3.4, wetlands protection, lead was the Warren Land Conservation Trust. I don't think we've talked about that with the comprehensive plan. I think we need to have a town as the lead with support from community group like the Warren Land Conservation Trust. The zoning rewrite to me on section 6, section 6, page 10, goal 2, is critical to the protection of wetlands and storm buffers. That's an area, again, that I'd like to see a bit more mapping. Specifically, there are some areas that are private, there are some areas that are town-owned, and those are located somewhat, but that focus is really important. For example, we had a proposal come before us about the development of land along the Kickamuit, and we were able to fend off that development, but having that as understood as a critical habitat, as critical as the Palmer River, for example, the document, is important for us in terms of being able to justify a zoning rewrite, that there couldn't be development there due to the fact that that's a critical buffer zone, for example. So beyond that, there were, some smaller elements, but I thought that it was very well handled. And as I was going through the goals, then I went to your action plan and saw you were actually taking care of those things. So that's my take on it. Members of the board?
Good job.
Any specific concerns or? Amplified, that in particularly for things, for example, like the zoning rewrite, you want to bring as many elements into focus with that to justify that kind of a rewrite. Right.
that picture, you can see the height is halfway on. It's wide. And you can see the picture. You see that line. Nice, exactly. This is what happens. Basically, it's unfortunate, like you said, it's I look at five like twice. Areas of flooding now. It's happening. And it's also not happening.
We may want to get a picture of that seal that ended up on Child Street, you know, as the mascot for this program.
He was embarrassing for it.
The face of hazard mitigation.
Didn't we have, some of what you said, I think I mentioned before, we entered into the pilot program, adaptation, and, at a speed that I like. DOT's on call engineers, PhD, call last week, and they did their own mapping, and they're like, what they're saying is real. We are getting people's attention, but once again, that rolls into the transportation element of emergency services, evacuation. So having these two documents.
And within the plan, what we've tried to do is use some of state planning's words back at them, DOTs, because in technical papers 164, 167, the state recognizes a lot of roads under their jurisdiction that are going to be compromised. And yet, we look at the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, and we see repavement. And it's like, what? Right. It's not, they're not taking what they know, taking the work that they've done, they've acknowledged, and they're not putting that into what needs to happen. So by using that in our plan too, and saying, these are your words, you're showing us that these roads are compromised. What are you going to do about it? So those are important things when Bob goes and talks to them and said, look, right. So we have tried to, again, use a lot of that documentation in the hazard mitigation plan to strengthen when you go and work with these other agencies, who hopefully are going to be partnering with you on these projects.
Well, we appreciate the Conservation Commission's vote of support on this and your review of it. Thank you. Butch, Matt?
All right. At the end, there's a slide where you talk about staff. What dynamic this is. And advising something like this. I guess I'm curious, are there any things that we can put in place? Document, like, hey, the next time you update this is what you should look at. This is it's not just like
And I apologize. That excellent point. So good. All right. What I did was I missed a step in this plan. It is not static. We have a review process, an implementation and review process that is ongoing in this. We have it set as once a year. You can do twice a year, even up to 4 times a year. Actually, the more you do from a CRS credit is better, but you do have to do it at least once a year, where you review what has been done. The planning department will be keeping documentation, trying to keep documentation as we go along, but then all departments will review the action plan and say what has been done at the end of the first year. What do we need to revise? You know, this no longer makes sense, or we've finished this, or now we've seen something new that we want to add. So that can be added on an annual basis. This plan it should not be static, and at least on an annual basis will be updated. So it won't be the whole plan, but at least in terms of the action plan. And if things have been, other initiatives have been started, something with the DOT or something with another group has been started, that can be added to the plan, you know, as an annual update. Yeah. To accommodate, absolutely. So thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, I missed that. It has built into it in chapter 7 or section 7, how you will go about doing that on an annual, on a regular basis, and who's involved in that.
Anyone else? Great, well, thank you for a terrific amount of work in the committee as well. That's a notable achievement, and it'll certainly help us from planning board side in reinforcing what you're saying in the comprehensive plan, so that we have all of those vectors coming together. Great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Oh, correct, yeah, more importantly. Could I have a motion to enthusiastically endorse the hazard mitigation plan as presented?
Is it then transmitted to whom?
To REMA.
Who?
Second? Second, Brett. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
They get to rewrite it if they oppose.
Yeah. I don't want to hear it. They know where we live. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That's really a lot of work.
Oh my God.
Blown away.
Wild going through that. Our next, I'd like to close the public meeting. Motion to close the public meeting. And a second. Jim Patterson and Brett. Jim made the motion. Next, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And our first order of business is review the major land development, its preliminary and final approval, AP 15A, lot 28, 281 through 282 on 665 Metacom Avenue. The owner is Denise O'Brien, RET. Applicant is Michael O'Brien. This is the development that we had before us. It was taking this land and setting up a number of apartments.
Which is 18 apartments. Correction on the agenda, I had it as preliminary final, you've already officially approved the master plan and preliminary plan, so this would be final, subject to.
Okay. Mr. D'Amico, the floor is yours. And when you're finished, you can just drop it. I'm pretty cavalier with the town equipment here.
I know I did with Will Smith.
Yeah, how about that? Good evening, board members. My name is David D'Amico, and I am the principal in the firm of D'Amico Engineering Technologies. with offices at 2080 Middle Spring Avenue in North Providence. I am a professional engineer registered in the state of Rhode Island. I do have the applicant, Mike O'Brien, here. If you have any questions. Just a little quick history. You gave us master plan approval May 3rd, 2001. We received conditional preliminary approval October 25th, 2001. And the condition for that approval was to go to DOT, get the PAP permit, and then come back for the final. That PAP submission was made just before that October meeting.
2020.
2020. What am I
Right, I was
saying?
thinking-
Am I saying 2001?
2001, yeah.
Put a lot of work
Correct
into
that.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. We all been there.
Senile dementia was.
We've been
kicking in.
there.
You grew the trees.
I don't
before
know,
you
is
got
there
it
much
back.
of a difference? Is there a difference between 2001 and 2021? Maybe.
worries.
There is. a
We
bit.
were here.
Yeah, we all were here. So that was my major task from there. I made that submission. It actually, for some reason, it took about a solid 3 months to get that, with only one set of comments and essentially with very minor revisions to the plan. One I can remember was move the stop bar back behind the property line. Another one was take a couple of shrubs that we had in the front because we're going to do landscaping in the front of the building along the area where the driveway is not. Take a few of those shrubs and bring them on the other side of the property line. They did make some comments relative to the drainage system, which is a permeable pavement system. Essentially, the bottom of stone of that system by DM's regs needs to be 3 feet difference. I had about, on an average, between 3 1/4 to 2 3/4. So it didn't quite make it. DM never, bothers me with that. I do these all the time. DOT, did stick with it. So what we did, our general mitigation for that is to add a sand at the bottom of the stone. So you would see that. So you'll see my section where we have to fill anyway. We have to come in there. We have to take off the top 6, 7, maybe a foot of topsoil in there and remove that, and then come back in, and we're filling up. And that was their biggest concern because that property drops off. And our property now is going to slightly gain. So when you look in there, you're going to actually look up into it. It's just more natural, and it's better for the position, the vertical position of the building. So other than that, we received the permit. I believe in my testimony originally, they would not need a traffic study for this. This does not fall to that threshold of a traffic study. You really got to get near the 100 vehicles trips in an hour, in the peak hour, and we're only around 13 to 15, 16 with an apartment in the peak hour. So it just doesn't meet that threshold. But I believe the way the board handled this, you did have one kind of objection from, I believe, the town of Bristol, and they did say that they recommended that you have us go to DOT for us to get the PAP, and I believe we've addressed that.
Refresh my memory. We have a final landscape plan.
Yes, we do. We have that in the set. Yes, sir.
I'm not to put it on the plan, so.
Great. Any questions, concerns? We did go over this exhaustively. Mr. D'Amico did a great job presenting it in the first case and second as well.
Thank
So we had gone over it exhaustively without, I mean, the Bristol comment came in the day of the meeting, as I remember it.
So, I mean, I know that initially your plan was to do two separate buildings. Are you still thinking in the future that's a possibility, or you recognize something wrong with water and drainage situation?
I would leave that to Mike.
Our intention is to, so I'm Mike O'Brien, and most of you know me, I've been here before. I'm the owner of the property along with my wife Denise. So it is our intention to pursue the additional development of the property. It's 2.33 acres. We're only going to be using a small fraction of that for this first building. So our ultimate goal is to continue back with at least one more building.
But I just, for, on the record, I wanted to be acknowledged that Mr. D'Amico has acknowledged that drainage and the water table are an issue, a concern of the residents from Bristol and also in Great Britain are potentially, drainage. It's a problem now. We acknowledge that. Perhaps it would be by whatever you want to do. That the community knows that that's not off the table, and I think it's important that planning board know that that's not off the table, but that's not being discussed tonight. We have to start this process.
Absolutely.
There's also the added complication that unfortunately you have real properties in different zones that you have around.
So that would be my point, that for the record, it will take a zone change to do the second building by the
Yes.
town council.
Yes. But
Right.
But from what I understand, based upon David's study, is what we've done in the front portion of that property, as far as elevation and fill, we can duplicate that without affecting the rear part of that property. You really can't touch it, but we feel comfortable. Based upon what David has told me, that we can add another building.
Again, you're gonna have to start the process.
Correct.
And the other thing I want to add is that when we originally talked about this, we were describing the Healy property being used as rental office, and I think that has changed.
It has.
Have that up. You have a monument of the party bus out the back now, and you're using that as residential property, rental property.
That's my intention. Things have changed since my original purchase of the property and the development of it. I purchased another complex which has an office, so I no longer need another office. So I
use that man.
actually, I've had a number of inquiries about
I'm
that.
sure you have.
Yeah, people want that van.
That's a museum.
Yeah.
There might be some creditors who are looking for that as well. I understand.
So, excuse me, does that change the plan that we approved? It's because it was supposed to be a rental office.
I would say that by it being used as residential, you cut down the frequency of people that might be going to that.
And it is a separate lot.
Several long.
And it's properly zoned for the intended use.
Great. Well, given this, where the vote is to provide final approval. Could I have a motion?
Somebody just solicitor needs to help with findings of facts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Somebody wants to start the motion, I'll.
Read the findings of fact. Great.
So somebody's supposed to make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Make a motion to approve
Yes.
based on testimony. Facts, development, shown final plan, subdivision that will allow for creation of it, lots, finding all those elements.
what he said. Could I have a second? Tyler? All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Good luck. Thank you. Our next order of business is the draft service and facilities element of the comprehensive plan. You all received this in the mail, email.
So I'd just like to give Allison had submitted some of the draft elements that have already been approved. We had, I don't know why I wanted to call it an uncomfortable conversation, but a conversation with the state like planners last week on what we submitted.
Oh.
As we expected, nothing they were receiving. Tag teaming, he said, well,
But, they didn't give an example of what standards we weren't meeting.
No,
So
they
that-
didn't.
I mean, yeah, so they haven't.
he anticipated that there's going to be some back and forth. but
Yeah.
I think we're going to prevail because.
Well, really an objection. It's not, physically long enough. I mean,
That was the only.
Yeah.
Length isn't one of the standards that,
No, I mean, that was exactly what. we
number of
didn't want.
paragraphs.
We didn't want a document that was so fat that no one would ever. read it.
exactly.
I mean, the same way we approach the hazard mitigation plan. You want to read the appendix, go for it.
Yeah.
So I circulated, I had some of my comments in red. Again, I mean, just looking for your comments. I mean, there's the moving targets here. I mean, again, with respect to one of my primary is two things. Is the availability of potable water. Anything that happens to that community, well, how would that compromise property values? And from a fire safety standpoint, there's concern with catching fires in the last 3 years. I mentioned earlier, question through Congressman Cini's office through this congressional directed spending for financial assistance to address the fire storage issue out in that area. But I do think that this environment in terms of the amount of federal money that is out there with respect to the infrastructure bill, why potable water may not be a problem today. I don't know that I can say confidently in years from now that that's not the problem. So I think it's something that should be elevated and continue to look at in terms of the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. For personal reason. The prioritized alternative water supply sources in Twisted, I mean, clearly this is one thing, but one of the very important elements there is in the short term, ensuring that the current supply, I'm the chairman of the Twisted Point Water Trust now, and I have many sleepless nights because that water is so vulnerable and because every house that goes up is 3 times the size of the one that it replaced. So fortunately, those houses are not all year round, but we have a very limited supply. There's nothing to indicate an endless supply. In fact, everything indicates the fact that over the course of the day's draw, the water goes down to almost a level that we can't measure, and it comes back up, and that's in the winter. So this is important, but so is zoning. So is being able to say to people, I know you'd like to live out here, but the Taj Mahal is not the house for you if, this is not the place for that. The alternative OWTS is in Tuisset. It's a problem. 2014 was the deadline for those. We've got two houses that share one cesspool that's still there. And that could easily impact not only the quality of the water, the drinking water, because it's right next to their well, so God knows how that was allowed, but also it's right on the coast. So those are, I would echo Bob's concerns about those, whether we can bring water to that area or not, but most importantly, in the short term, a moratorium on further connections with the water trust community well, but also a better infrastructure. And we've just recently spent almost $50,000 on remote monitoring for that system, and we're also looking at house monitors.
Yeah, I mean, I think, another consideration is I just limited to this conversation. So one aspect step that would be addressed in the comp plan is there a recommendation that there's a moratorium on any? There's a tipping point. We have aged sanitary infrastructure that we need to continue to look at. This is a unique opportunity that there are large funding that are available. The rules are being written as we go along right now. So it's made that community position in terms of how to have a conversation in terms of federal money that comes from the state for some of these infrastructure projects. It's an opportunity that it may mean nothing more than a statement that can't be acted on, but at least you made a statement.
When we had that active wastewater committee, there was work programs in place to assist people with removing the old.
Yeah, so I mean, we're actively following that. I mean, the legislation that said, cesspools had to be out by a certain date.
Yep.
I mean, that really hasn't been acted on. So what we've done is, those properties we've identified have cesspools, we put them on notice under the way the statute was written. They had 5 years to correct the problem. So there are funds available through Rhode Island Housing, low interest loan. People are taking advantage of that. For people that, for whatever reason, were rejected through Rhode Island Housing, the town has established a fund that we're not doing credit checks. We're giving people up to $25,000. We've had a couple of people take advantage of that. One has already been paid off. But the problem that the town has is we lack the enforcement authority for anybody that's in violation, and get a lot of, I'm out of the office at DM. Even before COVID was a problem, because the Fred had dealt with it, I had dealt with it. We get on one guy doing the whole entire state. But we are actively, we do have through the wastewater management district, we have a database of everybody that has either a septic system or cesspool. I think we have very few, if any, cesspools left, but we have some undersized septic systems.
Just a concern, some of these things are specific about add a map where sewer access is planned, identified potential water service areas for improvement. I think the more specific we get, we're liable to build an expectation that we will in fact do Tuisset. So touching it in terms of studies, evaluation, look at the alternatives seems to be a more palatable option than sort of committing to in any way, we will do these expansions to areas of town.
Yeah, I agree. I think, for example, page 2 of 13 on the services and facility, it said upgrade and expand public water. First of all, it's not public. It's Bristol County Water Authority. So this is a misapprehension that a lot of people,
It is public water, by definition, it's public water.
but it's not town. So I think when we say public, it,
But they're quasi-public. It's not the town. I mean, I don't think when people say public, they automatically think that's town.
well, yeah, my experience is they do. My experience is that the town owes us this because we pay taxes. And I'd like to avoid, as Mike said, that expectation that, and also it's upgrade and expand. You know, that may or may not happen. And also I'm, you know, personally, I don't think expansion of the sewer system is a great idea because you could potentially have a lot more development in an area that has some of the few open spaces that the town has left. So I'd rather say examine or explore instead of upgrade and expand.
Yes, I think the language there was trying to, we're also talking about Benetcon and a project area, so there's already public facilities there, but do they? Added,
Yeah,
there's gonna be increased development.
I mean, I think that's what you're trying to say, is that this is the argument that we're having with statewide planning, which you keep referring back to Benetcon plan. Yes, because we can concentrate development on Benetcon Avenue, it takes development pressure off of choices. We also have to be vigilant of, you know, how much additional capacity can we handle in those areas that we have existing services. And does that move the needle to have a conversation about having a regional sanitary sewer system? I don't think there's, you know, I'm not trying to suggest that we would expand sanitary sewer out to Whitson. There are some things we could look at as Whitson in terms of package plans, you know, like consolidated on-site wastewater treatment. I do think that we should have some statement in the comprehensive plan that at some point in the future, getting public water supply out to Whitson is critical. Whether it's this year, this plan, or the next plan, but it needs to be part of the narrative, I think, going forward.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just think that when you use upgrade and expand, first of all, you're not upgrading anything. There's nothing there to upgrade. So I just think explore the possibilities.
I think the policy is generic to the. So
We can work.
upgrade.
Okay. Yeah, again, I mean, I've sat in meetings where, you know, people are militant about what they're owed. You know, there's kind of weird entitlement. You know, you moved out here, you know what to expect, you know. So, yeah, anything we can do to forestall that is.
We can work on that. I know
Yeah, and I understand that it's an overall statement that refers to more than just one area of the town, so that makes sense.
Necessary.
Yeah. Page 3 of 13, manage stormwater volumes, reduce pollutants, mitigate untreated stormwater from entering. This is an area where I'd like to see not just Metacom and Market Street, but also areas outside of those, because there's the Palm River, the Warren River, the
We can
Kickamuit.
expand on that. We have two road end projects on Warren River, Street, Beach Street. Got one on the Kickamuit. Nothing to do with Market.
Yeah, I'd just like to see it in here.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And I would say, you know, like, I mean, I'm on that river all the time. There's 6 or 7 streets that empty into the Kiffamua with absolutely no filtration whatsoever. So that's something that needs to be addressed because the Kiffamua and the hazard mitigation plan is listed as low intensity use, which is, a kind of one step below, drinking water. So. Sort of.
Is there any need to talk about regionalization of some of these services, or you think that's?
I'm talking about regionalization. I don't think that I don't think communities can survive without talking. I mean, certainly with respect to sanitary sewer, I think you have to talk about regionalization. We already have it with respect to public water.
With safety as well.
Public safety, right? I mean, so, I think, regionalism is a big part of all of this, for sure.
And you want to deal with that in the comp plan?
I think as we get to different elements, we will for sure.
So, but this one, services and facilities seems a natural place to do that.
We can expand
I'm trying to
upon,
get an
on
underground tank,
sanitary.
is what it's talking.
I know that Bristol County Water is looking to create a redundant system now for East Providence.
Right.
They're not part of Bristol County, but there's some funding issues that affect us, Bristol County Water, right? Yeah, I'll get with Allison. I think it's absolutely okay to expand upon that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a policy here. An action. But
But some text would also probably be useful. Some text.
with the text out there. Good thing.
I noted that in the, there has been this kind of wave of trash and recycling that's gone on in the town. Certainly some kind of public, I know that brochures have been put out on this, but for example, my next door neighbor had styrofoam, this freaking recycling thing the other day and had to take it out and put it in his trash. I'm wondering if people have need a shot in the arm.
And there's a couple of large
The head would actually be better.
associated with that is that, there is no question that the central landfill is at some point going to reach capacity. And what do you do at that point? The other part of that is with respect to sanitary sewer, if we reduce whatever goes through the wastewater plant to sludge, that sludge gets brought up to an incinerator in Woonsocket. That facility is near capacity. Not things people like to talk about, but
Yeah, you got it.
but these are things that are actually happening that we deal with on a daily basis. We saw, because of COVID, where people working at home, that recycling went up. Recycling is good for us because that's a cost to get credit.
Right.
Trash is bad. So, I think it is legitimate to, bring both of those issues up, that what's the what if. And then to Michael's point, in terms of regionalism, that's when you really need to start to have this conversation. It's not any single town is going to be able to do what these issues want.
Yeah, I think, regular, it used to be that in the Providence Journal, I used to have this really great article by a woman who worked at Rhode Island Recycling, who was talking about it every Sunday, about what was going on. It really needs to go home. I see it, I'm riding my bicycle, I look at the recycle and the trash things, and you can see very clearly that somebody has put wood in the recycling bin. It's just baffling to me, but I tend to think that, if people get it in front of their faces a little bit more often.
Putting a dirty pizza box in its cardboard and recycling is not the thing.
Yeah,
I was surprised that the recycling rate is as low as it is, to tell you the truth.
It went up during.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but it went back down.
yeah.
Right. Same thing, in terms of what we said, we're getting public engaged in a conversation about climate change. These are things that you don't think of, they'll think about throwing stuff out in the trash.
Well,
Well,
there-
and the other thing is a lot of communities implement pay as you grow programs.
And that's something that we might want to do.
That's the most really effective. You can see the communities that have the grow at the highest recycling rates because they.
I like pay as you throw. I
So
think
they'll
that's,
learn quickly.
I mean, I think that's something we should.
Can we
really
put that in there?
it
But
is.
as a council has the courage to, kind of go with that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it starts to impact people in their own wallet, and then they start paying a little bit more attention.
Yeah, so that's in here. Consider implementing.
It is paid.
Yeah, yeah.
Implementing a
Great.
pay-as-you-grow system, reevaluate unlimited programs.
And it also has a benefit to the town budgetary side.
Some hill towns.
Anything, I've got page 5 of 13, but anything in between that?
Well, we kind of have a rough draft. I felt, this still wasn't quite, I didn't want to. It's not formatted like, you're right, it's not formatted like other drafts you have seen previously, so it's. Want to at least get some initial reaction. So,
And to be fair, we did complain that the numbers didn't work the last time because you were in the middle of it, you know what I mean? And so we were like, so yeah, I can understand why.
add those for next time, but I want you.
Yeah, no, it's good. On page 5, 13, third paragraph down, private wells, including a community well that serves about 100 homes in the Twislet neighborhood of Warren, are shallow and vulnerable to contamination and overuse. I don't want to say they're unreliable because that's not accurate.
So it's shallow and.
The Twislet neighborhood of Warren are shallow and vulnerable to contamination and overuse. And that's, everything else works there. Interestingly enough, there is the fire chief has put out a report on that area where they're going to be drawing water from the Mount Hope Bay and the Kickamuit River as a means of fighting fires. So the hydrant thing is,
But that's not, I mean, that's an interim solution.
Right.
I mean, I think we need,
long-term.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's, again, we're putting in for those congressional earmarks. Because that's a big ticket item, but it's good to have the interim solution. But that has a cost on. That aren't necessarily covered.
For salt water, yeah, I know, that's what it is.
Should that be referenced in the comp plan or?
Yeah,
is it
I'll
as
send
a
you some language.
interim?
Sure.
Interim. I think I saw it online.
Yeah, I mean, I think the red language in there makes sense. Interestingly enough, I think, I was just looking at some pictures for bathroom. Can't get anything that's not low flow now. I don't think plumbing supply houses will sell. Yeah, kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to get a President Trump shower with a tremendous amount of flow, and I wasn't able to, which is just as well, isn't it?
Are the red?
Does it come with the toilet that takes 15 times the flush?
I've already got one of those.
Are the red questions posed, are those interim as well?
Some of them were
And
questions,
so-
some of them that were the out. Standard text or questions that Alice had, those that read that were in italics or kind of micros.
Like, I just don't remember.
The building moratorium is something I had.
When I read require no flow fixture,
That was,
is that writ large across the entire town or is that?
it should be everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
I just, having listened to that conversation. There are
Well, and they're close together too, which is a fire problem. You know, there's, the larger the houses, the closer they are together, the greater the risk for spread and fire, which is why the fire protection has become an issue out there, because the last fire we had, you know, several houses almost went off as a result of one house.
But again, one of the advantages we have with Allison, she is the planner and short. So some of these issues that finite resources that are available, they're dealing with too. But, yeah, if cut and paste tomorrow. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but they have some more concerns that I'm hearing. And just all, you know, all the. Power heads and not something that.
Yeah, should be.
Sorry.
I would say, page 6 of 13, third paragraph down. Sorry to be hammering this Tuissa thing, but sewer expansion to Tuissa will be considered with the public water supply planning project. That to me is too much of a promise. Kind of,
And that's my
yeah, I
point.
don't think you're going to see sewer on
no, and I don't want to, you know, I mean, I don't think a lot of people want to see it up there.
increase their property values.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would.
Yeah, not if the property
Killing
value
the-
was like from a density standpoint, perhaps, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's killing the goose that lays the golden egg. Why do people live out there? Because it's a nice area. You know, you fill it full of houses and pave it over and kiss paradise goodbye.
So one question on that, I know. It's to incorporate on the map, if you're planning on expanding water. Put it on the map. If there's- And it sounds like it's a top priority, and it's going to happen at some point in the future. But not really. Just put it on the map and
That would be my view.
even if it's generally.
I don't think you're going to see expanded sanitary out there, but I think there has to be some conversation
Going to be talked about
about water.
Yeah,
So is what has been drafted? It sounds like we need to tweak it a little bit, but is there one concept there is strong? Like what we were talking about, if you want to put on that one thing. Yeah, if a city is.
yeah, because I mean, there's a variety of places that could come across the Kickamill River, under the river, you know, and particularly if you got federal money, you know, a $20 million project is not something the town's going to take on, or the Bristol County Water Authority, but with federal money, they might consider it. So, yeah, I mean, it's just not raising expectations because there's enough.
Expectations already.
No, I don't think it raised your expectation, but I do think the narrative has to address the potential.
Oh, absolutely, I agree. I just want to be careful
It's
about
probably
that.
not 20 million, it's probably 20 billion.
Yeah,
What about adding into that, an action item about securing funding for, like, we could,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that kind of explains that we need funding. We want to do this, but we need funding. So we could
Exactly.
Put that action in there.
And I think there's an alignment to public safety, economic development, like you and I can.
And that, so that's mentioned in the narrative that it might need to be, if it's not resolved. My building permit may be considered, so it's thrown out there, but it's soft, and you could go ahead and put it, or you could put it actually as an F.
Essentially. I mean, if for no other reason to engage people in conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that'll
So I
get
can-
people.
That'll do it.
it.
Good way to go.
Anything else?
This is a question. Since this is facilities and services, water service, does the town have any role? Town have any role in getting natural gas?
So, I met with the governor. So, National Grid, the National Grid does what they want to do right now. So, one of the things I've suggested to this administration is that the Attorney General has filed a lawsuit to prevent sale to ED, and I don't think he's going to prevail, but I think there are a number of conditions that he can request to keep funding solar canopy projects. We can't force the public utility to do anything. The same expense that Bristol County Water or somebody else would encourage bring piping out there, but that raises the question, well, if you did it simultaneously, how could you save money? So, I mean, I think having a statement that having access to natural gas, does that fall under the category of energy conservation, renewable? That, I think, that's something to be considered.
So, and there is part of the.
I'll come up with some.
What's the scoop with broadband? Is it ultimately, like, from what I understand, Verizon is going to be able to send 5G without cable? Is that
It's a high-speed wireless. We don't have Verizon in these days.
right?
So, I mean, right now, I was going to speak to this, I'm sure all of you, everyone here has responded to the broadband survey that we have out. If not, I would be sending it to you again, for a housing survey. But right now, there's fiber down 114, no fiber to any side streets. And so there's a considerable amount of money coming to the state broadband. We're actively involved in these conversations. We think that it should be state should stand up an office of broadband. We're one of the 2 states in the country that doesn't treat it as a utility. We're number 2 with Mississippi EA. So, I mean, it's something that
Well,
we're
shucks.
actively looking at, but again, similar to water and sewer. What's the cost for I3 or Cox, who serves this area, to bring fiber out to 300 homes in Twisted? But one of the things we're looking at is that we provide high-speed wireless meter systems.
Right.
And we are looking at that. But broadband is critical to us advancing as a state for a number of reasons. I think we are going to address it in this. But there's a lot of, even I3, we have a really good relationship with people are complaining. Yeah, they are. I mean, people don't know what they know now.
Right.
And, you might think that if you're getting 30 over 30, you got 50 over 50, that's great, but you should be having, like in this day and age, you should have at least 200 over 200.
Right.
And then, in 2 years, you should have 1,000 over 1,000. You've got kids at home gaming. You should be concerned about this. If you're doing television, you're doing education. I mean, 100 over 100 really isn't cutting it, because what you have is a fiber system connecting to
results or?
Yeah, I mean, we've got initial results. I mean, you get 10% of people who respond. That's great. I mean, we're going to extend it. I think we've had about 2% of people who respond. I mean, there's a speed test that they can take. We haven't taken any of the data and searched through it yet, but we've got a big push coming on the next couple of weeks. But broadband is definitely going to be a big part of.
So it's here, but it's
Yeah,
a little bit
we will.
of stats
Yeah.
to show them.
Anything else? Thank you again, Allison, for your ongoing work here. You'll someday be rewarded for this by someone other than this board. But at least we can say nice things and mean them. Appreciate your work on this.
No, it's Allison, Kim, and Johnson.
Well, these two things together, this is really fantastic. I mean, the hazard mitigation, to be able to bolster the comprehensive plan with that and have that kind of cross pollination, really strong.
It's nice to have them.
Yeah.
So for next meeting, yeah, I'll have.
And hopefully we'll have the comments back from statewide planning.
Oh, right, yeah.
We'll have to mail these early this time.
Give us a ring and we could show up. Oh, you want it longer, do you? All right.
That's amazing.
Any other comments, concerns,
Yeah, so I just
administrative
want to
matters?
share some legislation that is legislation in this session with respect to educational, continuing educational requirements for planning board members, zoning board members, or district commission members. That sometimes is onerous. I can't say with respect to this board is concerned. I could say with respect to some other boards in town, I'm concerned. But just, you should be aware that this legislation is going to require that on a regular basis, we're all participating in some continuing education. Personally, I feel that it's important. I have a lot of confidence in the board that you all take this responsibility seriously, that you do research and pay attention, you ask the right questions. I do have concerns with some other boards that don't. No reason to summarize it all right now for you, but just be aware that this is out there. There's a couple of pieces of legislation now that are addressed towards planning board, zoning board, here, historic district.
What's the intent, Bob?
I think to make them more accountable.
Which is a good thing.
I get it. I mean, as in my position, having people that take it seriously is important. In no way is that ever a criticism of this. I think they all the time and research, but there are other boards in town that people kind of just kind of show up to the meeting and have issues. We have issues that result in potential litigation. That's never good. And that's not good for the community. So be interesting to see where this goes. But I'm not against it. I think that in a lot of cases, it'll make people resign. That's not a bad thing either. I think there's some responsibility when town councils and big people that they spend a little bit more time understanding what people's commitment to what they're doing is and what their understanding is. Suggestion that before somebody gets appointed, that they take. It's all provided for free through the state, but just be aware that this is out there. So if you have, any comments about it, you might want to reach out to your state legislator or your state senator.
Bob, are we doing anything further on the size of the planning board? Remember we talked about
Yeah, I don't
reducing.
know if the Charter Review Commission has it in there or not. I mean,
Legislation. Would have to be changed, I believe.
it is nine, yeah, it's nine. One thing, like, as a result, they're getting away from the requirement for majority. there are some, actually, I think this is a really thoughtful piece.
Yeah, because this has 5 is the majority.
5 is on zoning.
Oh, okay.
There's 2 sections in there. There's planning section and there's zoning section. Planning boards have 5 members. Planning boards have none.
But we talked about doing 7 with 2 alternates.
But as Ben said, it's going to require us to make an application to the state.
Actually, it takes a act of the General Assembly, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
There are, but I thought there were other planning boards that are smaller.
Right, because they had it amended. It's kind of far away now, but I think that's what I thought last time. That it's a lot more. Yeah, that we can't just simply approve the charter review.
I see.
We can make that recommendation, but then
Right.
we would have to take that recommendation to the state.
Okay.
And of the 9 of you, no, I don't.
No, I'm not, I wasn't looking to shrink it down.
I mean, since I've been doing this, 2017, this is, in my opinion, the best that this group has been. Beyond the anticipation.
All right, thank you, Bob, for that. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Jim Patterson, second.
Awesome.
Tyler, all in favor? Aye. See you next month.